This is Jim Gibson. Thank you for joining me today on this channel. Very much appreciate it. And today is Tips and Tools of the Trade, Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1, go check it out. But we're into Part 2 now. On Part 1, we discussed about ceiling tiles. We discussed about tool pouches on the belt. And we also talked about ladders. Pretty extensive thing about ladders. Ladders are dangerous, and they can cause you to be involved in a lawsuit, especially if someone is injured or killed by a ladder. And yes, you can be killed by a ladder. You didn't tie it right on top of your truck, it flies off, goes through a windshield, it could kill people. So, pay attention to that, and let's get on with Part 2. So the next thing is a vacuum cleaner. Yes, you got these little DeWalt. I'm a DeWalt man, so you can have these little portable vacuum cleaners that have batteries on the side. You can plug them in, it will charge up your battery. If you can't find a 110 plug or the power's not in the building yet because it's still being cabled, things like that, well, then you have your little battery pack that sits on the side and can power up the vacuum cleaner. Always clean up your mess. Sometimes when you're cutting through a drywall and you have a drywall saw and you're cutting through, it produces dust. Now, what I have done in the past to really catch most of that dust is I have had a piece of paper and I pushed it up against the wall where I was cutting. So the dust fell into the paper, then I could hold the paper and dump it into the trash. But no matter what you do, you still have to vacuum. You still find out that there's dust that escaped the bulk of, where the rest went on the paper. And so you really need to have a small vacuum cleaner. It really does need to be cleaned up. Remember, the first rule of cabling, the first rule is, does it work? But the second rule should be, is it done in a professional manner and neat? Not just, a rat's nest in the data room behind the patch panel, that's nonsense. Or dust on the floor all over the place, footprints on ceiling tiles, have handprints, things like that. So have a small vacuum cleaner. The next is the thing that a lot of my guys had and that I always used is one of these little buckets. And this is just a 5-gallon bucket. This one is for pull string. We used it at 6,500 feet of pull string. And that's for a story for another video. But it's nice because it has all the places where you can put your tools. So when you're working in a data room, you have one of these with all your tools on it. You reach them really quick. It's better than a tool bag that you got to go through to find the tool you need when you're putting together a data rack or things like that. Plus, I always use the center for trash. Now, sometimes you can use the center for your RJ45s. So if you're jacking on the different walls and you have RJ45s, well, then you can use the center to put your product there. You can pull it out, put it on the wall, take the plastic bag that they come with, throw them in the trash here. You're absolutely doing great. So that's one of the things you should have is one of these buckets, tool buckets. Man, I don't know how expensive it is. The nice thing about it is you can put right here, you could put your electrical tape. I always use electrical tape, man, on these type of jobs. Go through a lot of electrical tape. But it's a nice thing to have. It's inexpensive. You should have, each of your employees should have something like this. Maybe they can have their name on it. Like, I have my name here, Gibson, on it. This was the one I would use when I'd go out and cable. That's another thing too. If you're the owner and you have 5-10 employees, you need the cable also. You need to go out there every once in a while and help with the cabling so you can remember that what it is to cable, and you could see how your people are performing and what they're doing. Sometimes they're really good people are quiet. They're not saying anything. They're just diligent. They're working hard. And you never know how good they are until you actually see it. And you'd be surprised the time difference. Some people work a little slower when the boss isn't there. So you really need to be involved. Now next, you should always have a bunch of plastic bags. Now why do you need plastic bags? Well, I'm thinking of those little lunch bags. Cheaper the better. You don't need the Ziplocs or things like that. Just a sandwich bag. And what we would use it for is sometimes we would cable, and while we were cabling, we'd get to the point to where we would pull all the cables down the wall. They'd be sticking out, the cables that haven't been jacked yet. But, it might be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and we still have hours before we're going to break. But we knew they were going to come in, let's say, the next day, and they were going to spray the walls, with surface texture. And then they were going to come in and they were going to spray paint over the texture and things like that. And that stuff gets all over the place. So what we would do is we get a plastic bag, would continue to work, and we'd start, doing the punching down of the jacks, the RJ45s, and then we would wrap a plastic bag around the RJ45 and secure it, maybe with a wrap or two of electrical tape, and then try to push it back into the wall. Then when they would come by and they would spray, look, they got their job to do. They're not going to wait for you, okay? If you're in the way, that's your problem. If your install is in the way, that's your problem. You should have known. That's what the other trades, and that's how they're going to treat you on the job site. So we always covered it with plastic, tried to push it back into the wall, just where we could grab it when it was time to set finish. And then if they sprayed over it, then it wouldn't, hurt it. Now, set finish. Set finish is a term that I use when you do all your pre-cable, which is bring the wires down the wall, and then the next thing you do is you jack, and then the last thing you do is set finish, and that's putting on the face plates, making sure they're nice and level and nice and neat and everything else, and so that's called set finish. So between pre-cable and set finish, you have sometimes those jacks, and that's where you put the plastic bags over the jacks, put them back in the wall. I remember the story once. I worked for Burlington Air Express as a project manager, so I had to go to all the installs throughout the United States, and I had to make sure that the installs were taking place properly, the way they were supposed to, according to contract. In fact, I would write the contract for each of the installs to make sure that they used the cable I requested, make sure they used the jacks I requested, make sure everything was done according to pattern. Even the backboards. So the backboards is where you put the equipment, the alarm system, things like that. And those years ago, it was also a piece of wood, a 5/8 inch piece of wood that was attached to the wall. And on that was your phone system, things like that. But anyway, I was there and I was just drinking coffee, watching what they were doing, and they were pretty good. And they already set finish. And I said, well, guys, they're going to come in and spray tomorrow. They're going to spray paint this building tomorrow. I said, it's kind of early to set finish. And on top of that, they're plugging in phones. And I said, look, I have not signed for those phones yet, and I have not signed off on your work in this building. You're way ahead of the other trades. Don't do this. Another trade sees that phone on the ground. Some people aren't ethical. They're going to take that phone. Somebody else is going to move the furniture. They might put it on top of the phone. And when they come out to do the spraying, then, the problem you're going to have is you're going to have spackle and spray all over your phone. And I haven't signed for it yet. And the guy said, our boss said we have to do this. I said, okay, just remember I haven't signed for it. So sure enough, 2 or 3 days later, I showed up to do the final sign off, and the phones were sprayed. There was overspray from spraying the walls. They didn't even tape up the faceplates. They just sprayed over the jacks and everything else. So remember that it's your responsibility to be at the right time. So you have to set finish after they paint the walls, but it's best to pull cable before they paint the walls, because if you mark up the wall after it's been painted, it's your fault. So I would always get in there before they painted and get the cable down the wall, and there's a procedure there, and I have some videos on that about what it looks like and how to do it and everything else. But at the same time, I wouldn't set finish until all the painting and the carpet was in. So pay attention to that, and bring some plastic bags. All that was just about plastic bags. Okay, the next thing. You're going to like this, man. Let's see, can you see that? I don't know, can you see it? It has lights in there, and it's lights. Man, you need to have lights. Now, it's 3 different types of lights you should have. I really like these hats. And I remember once when it was just me in the company, I was starting the company, and I was still working at Burlington Air Express in Irvine, California. And at 5 o'clock, I would go into the men's room and I would change out of my suit and tie, and I'd put on my dungarees and my t-shirt that had my logo on it, and I would go out to my truck and I would drive to the location where I was going. And there was a job up in the City of Industry. Now, back then, and I'm sure it's even worse today, City of Industry was not a place to be at night. And I went into the building. I had access to the building. No one else was there. No one moved in yet. And they didn't have any power. Then I had to punch down what is called a 66 block. And man, I couldn't find it. And I had one of these little flashlights, which I recommend you have. And then I had to look all over the place. Then when I found it, it was in the ceiling. The 66 block was in the ceiling. So I had to do this thing, as I'm on top of a ladder trying to punch down. Or, put it in your mouth, and as you're punching down, hold it with your mouth and all. So I would have loved to have this type of hat, by the way, back then, but I did not. Since then, I have bought it. This is a really nice hat, by the way. It's really cool. It has a battery pack in there that you can change out the batteries, things like that. It's really good to have. You should have that. Your employees should have it. Don't let them go out on it unprepared. When you show up at work, you show up prepared, period. Do not borrow from other people. So the next thing, and you already saw it, you should have this type of flashlight. Now, the best of your ability, get a flashlight that's really bright. And if you have to, you spray paint it, bright orange or bright yellow so people know it's yours. And you can find it when you lay it down up in the ceiling tiles. I've seen that, where I pulled a ceiling tile to do something, and there's tools up there from like 5 years ago, along with a mag light. So sometimes you can get an extra mag light. Now, the third light you should have is one of those lights that are on a tripod. They run off a battery sometimes. They can plug into an outlet and run off the outlet. They're LEDs now, and you can set them up really high and have them, shine down on the ground. And where they're used the best is in a construction site where you're building a data room, and sometimes they don't have electricity in the building yet. And you can get a cheap stand that runs off electricity. I mean, they don't cost much, but the nice ones, the LEDs, like from DeWalt. Again, I'm a DeWalt guy. All my power stuff is DeWalt. You can have one of those, and at the same time, if you do have power, it charges up your batteries. It has a place where you can put your batteries in. If you don't have power, it can run off your battery. So you really need that on a decent sized project when it's new construction or tenant improvement, TIs going on. You really need that type of light in the data room, especially in the data room. You don't want to haul that around to do jacks. That's where the little flashlight and especially the hat works so well. I really like this hat. This is a great hat. Works for me really well. So you need the lights. You got to have the lights. Next, remind your people that they are not movers, okay? They're there to install cables. They're not there to assist the movers. And the reason I say that is I had a person injured because he decided to be the nice guy and help people move heavy stuff like a refrigerator into the building. Now, I know some people are going to balk at this, that you should always be nice, you should always support your customer. Absolutely. If it's something little, pick up a box and, a banker's box and put it on the table for this young lady who is doing her stuff. Okay, I understand that. But this guy in particular had taken some time away from the job and decided to help. And guess why? The next day he said, "Oh, I pulled my back. I don't think I could go to work today. And something, I need some, I need the insurance thing, and I need to do this and workers' comp and everything else." Your guys are not movers, okay? And if you damage something, you're responsible too. So there's a way to say it that's polite, that's nice, and there's some judgment in here. So yeah, you just want to let your guys know that they're not movers. You know, volunteering, I think sometimes even amongst employees is a difficult thing because people generally want to help each other. So I had an employee working, cabling a suite, for a small business. You know, it had one office and it had a warehouse attached to the back. And on one side of it was another suite, and then on the other side was a couple other suites and things like that. And as he was working, there was this building had been around for a while, so it had a lot of low voltage cabling up in the ceiling. And the owner said, hey, do you mind, while you're up there, would you mind cutting out that old cable? And of course, he said, sure, I'd be happy to. He's a nice guy. He wanted to help out. So, you know, he was up there in the ceiling and he's cutting out cables. Now, if you're a cabler, you know right then you're pulling your hair out and your eyes are getting wide and you know, stuff like that. You never cut a cable that you don't know where it goes. That's first of all. Secondly, he was not paid to take the cables out of the ceiling, and leaving them in the ceiling wouldn't hurt. Especially if you have a drop ceiling and they're above the drop ceiling, no one's going to see them. There's no need to spend 2 hours cutting cables and making it look nice. Well, as you could imagine, I got a call the next morning by that customer and said, hey, your guy that was here yesterday cut some cables that he shouldn't have cut, and now everyone else on the block doesn't have internet access or telephones. Oh, gosh. I went to him and I said, you really didn't do that, did you? And he said, yes, I thought I was being nice. And I said, well, it shows you don't have wisdom in this area. Now we had to go back with a crew and we had to recable all those suites, you know, all those little offices that were there in that business park because someone decided to do something nice. I'm not for, look, you want to do something nice? Absolutely, fine, you know, but you got to be careful. And in this case, you never cut cables. We charge to clean up buildings. So when, you know, we would have business owners, property owners would come in and say, can you clean up all these cables? Yeah, but one of the things in there is that we accidentally cut a cable that can hurt somebody else that's in the building or something. It's the building owner that's responsible for that. And we would charge so much money to take out the old cables. There's no need to take out old cables, okay? They're not hurting anything, and you may be able to use them in the future. But there has been business owners that want the cables out. And there's also some code in different cities and all that says you have to take the cables out when you leave. Jeez. I've seen people... Beautiful cabling job. The place was cabled, and a new owner moves in, and he calls us up, and all the cables are cut right at the ceiling level in the data room. I mean, that's just nasty stuff, man. We could have used all that cable, saved a ton of money. Anyway, don't cut cables. Next along these lines is don't make an agreement where someone's brother is going to help you with an install. Man, run from that job. Don't do it. Say no. Either we do the whole thing ourselves or you go get someone else to do it. Because I remember once that we had this sizable job. I guess it was like 30 outlets. And as we're doing the outlets, or we're signing up the agreement, the salesperson agreed to let that person use his brother-in-law or his brother or something to cable the building. He was going to cable the building, and all we had to do is just go in and put the phone system on the wall and set up the data racks. And of course, when we got there, the cable was sticking out of the wall, and I said to the owner, I said, hey, your brother or brother-in-law or next door neighbor or whoever it was, they need to jack that. And he said, no, we said we would do the cabling, but we didn't say we were going to do the jacking. Jeez. That was a tough one because we jacked it. And as we're jacking it, realized that he followed the electrician way of a home run. And of course, we spent some time talking to him about this, so we ate up time in that area. But electricians, when they do home runs, and this is years ago, most electricians know differently today, But when they would hook up a cable from the circuit box, breaker box, they would run the cable to the first jack or the first outlet on the wall, and then they'd run it at another cable from that outlet to the next outlet, and then from that outlet to the next. And so that would be considered a home run. Now in data world, okay, in low voltage cabling, each jack gets completely its own cable. And I've heard people say, well, you can gerrymander, use this pair there and that pair there. You know, just be professional. Do the cabling yourself and explain to your customer that that's the only way they're going to get a guarantee of 15 years on the cabling. 20 years, you can do whatever you want. Cabling doesn't fall apart after 5 years or 20 years. But that's the only way they're going to get that warranty, is if you do it from beginning to end, from outlet to patch panel. Okay, last, there's plenty more, but just to wrap it up, this is the last one. And again, subscribe, hit the bell, or ring the bell, whatever they call it, and give me a thumbs up, please, if this is good, if this is what you like. But the last thing is as a low voltage contractor, you can't have other trades tell you what to do. You can't have the owner tell you what to do. I mean, don't be rude. You listen, you be kind, you be understanding. You try to accommodate them what they want. But you can't have the general, the sub tell you what to do. You have to, you know your job, you know how to get it done. I'll give you an example. Got a phone call, and the owner of this building that was going in, multiple story building, started accusing me of, you know, well, you guys should have been out here and you should have done this already, and I don't know why I hired you and everything else. It's like, okay, what's the problem? Well, the general contractor says that you need to get out here and put the phone system on the wall and hook up the computer network. I said, absolutely. I said, let me get it scheduled. Let me run out there now and take a look at it. Because I didn't think you were ready yet, but let me take a look at it. So I ran out there as fast as I could, got in the truck, you know, got out there. And I said, now, according to plans, the data room is going to be right next to the elevator on the 3rd floor. Is that correct? And he said, yes. So I walked up the steps all the way up to the 3rd floor and looked over to where the data room is supposed to be, and there's no floor. So it's 3 stories down. And I said, we can't put the phone system in right now. We can't even finish cabling until you get a floor next to the phone, to the elevator. And, you know, I explained to him that physically I don't have anyone that tall to be able to install cables on the 3rd floor when there's no 2nd floor and when there's no 3rd floor. What are they going to stand on? And of course, the owner said, well, we'll set up a scaffolding. It's like, no, you don't even have power yet. This is going to need power to turn this system on. And he said, well, you know, we have generators. He said, computer networks and generators don't go very well. And as long as you don't need a warranty, I'd be happy to put it in. And of course he said no. And I said, how about if I just hook you up one phone, one analog phone, put it on your desk, and then you can tell the phone company to send all the phone calls through that phone. And he was a happy man. But you have to control your work. You can't have other people tell you you need to do it at a certain time. You have to communicate with the other trades to make sure you're there on the proper time. You have to keep the customer always informed. Over communicate, I say. Tell him more information than he wants to hear. And that's how you end up with a successful install. Especially at communication, you got to over communicate. One last story, I just remember I was told to get out and do cabling, and I was already, and I went out to do the cabling. As I went out to do the cabling, I showed up and there was no drywall. All there was metal studs, you know, the studs that you see. And I said, you know, now's not the time to put the low voltage cabling in. And he said, yes, it is. General contractor again. Said, yes, it is. Because it'll be easier for you if you put the cable in before the drywall goes up. And I explained, I said, no, you got to understand. If I put the cable in now, I had to protect it from the drywall people who are putting in long screws and things like that. I said, believe it or not, we know what we're doing. We've done millions of these things. And the best time to do it is before the drop ceiling is in and after the drywall goes up. So here's some ideas. I hope these things will help you understand what you're getting into if you're going to do low voltage cabling. And as a commercial low voltage cabler contractor, I'm a licensed contractor in low voltage. I think California is probably the only state in the country that requires you to have a contractor's license for low voltage. But to make a long story short, I hope I helped you. I hope you learned a lot in this thing. Please subscribe, hit the bell, give me a like, give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching. Please send it to friends, send it to anybody you want. Make your comments. I would like to hear from people to know that somebody is at least listening. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll catch you on the next video.